Hello, everybody, and welcome to HP Critical, a podcast where normally me and my friends will talk about all things gaming, but it is just me today, and I'm your host, Brandon, and we're going to be just talking about PAX East because I went there for the first time ever, really. So yeah, PAX East, Boston, in case you didn't know. They also have PAX West, which I believe is in Seattle, but yeah, it was my first time going to the convention, and I have some thoughts. PAX is an event that I have seen from, I guess, afar for maybe over a decade at this point. And I've always known it to be a convention that was themed off games. And in the past, I've even seen that once upon a time, PAX used to be this big mecca where the biggest game companies would go there and, provide a few demos. So lines would be obscenely long for people trying to play games not yet to release. So that was cool. To see that all the different times and all the different booths that they would make. But PAX isn't quite that anymore. So it's definitely downscaled in the past few years, similar to how E3 just at this point has kind of evaporated. PAX is definitely more of an actual convention now, no longer a game media destination, I guess, for lack of better phrasing. But I think that's still fine. I went to the convention, not really knowing that, but I still had a great time because I've been to conventions before, but the convention that I'm most familiar with going to has been MegaCon in Orlando, and that is just a pure fandom-based convention. It is literally anything that you could think of. Like if you like anime, you got your fix there. You got video games, you got comic books, just television shows and movies in general. Just actors will just be there. Like the last MegaCon I went to just had a panel with the High School Musical cast. But this one, PAX East, is very hyper-focused on gaming. And to be clear, it is not just video games. You're any kind of game you can think of. So you also got tabletop games. You also have card games. There's a lot of setups for all of those things. Like there were so yeah, I guess kind of rolling my impressions into here since I'm already talking about it. Yeah, I was surprised just like that despite the fact that this is a convention just themed on gaming itself, it still was very full. There was still a lot to experience and do at this convention. Almost overwhelming so if you don't have kind of like a regular plan. But, I mean, I was kind of there just for the vibe, so I was just kind of doing whatever. But, yeah. So there was like a PC gaming area, for example. So there's like a whole bunch of different computers, like the latest bleeding edge hardware you could think of for PCs. You could go sit down there. Just try out a really good PC. If you don't have like the highest quality PC out there, you could just try it. Try a few PC related games. I saw a bunch of people like doing games like League. Some people were playing Marvel Rivals, just like a whole bunch of different setups doing that. And adjacent to it was essentially the big card game area. So for those who don't know, this PAX East, Square Enix was kind of there. They're partnering with Wizards of the Coast to make a collaboration in Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy theme. So a bunch of Final Fantasy cards are coming to Magic the Gathering. So they had a lot of different Magic the Gathering booths. There was a big presence of that card game there. You could go get a bunch of different merchandise. There was sets where you could take a picture of the flowers in the church in the Sector 7 slums in Final Fantasy 7. There was also like you could take a picture with the backdrop of Midgar and even hold like a Buster Sword. It was pretty cool. But again, themed after Magic the Gathering because they're doing all those different cards and such. And it's not just Final Fantasy 7, I want to be clear. It's like from the entire series. I've seen Final Fantasy 16 cards. Like Ben Starr was there to present in one of the press conferences that they had. Then they also have Final Fantasy 9 cards, 10 cards, just like the entire series. So if you're into Magic the Gathering and or Final Fantasy, this is something you're going to want to have a look for. But yeah, no, a whole bunch of different card games. There's also Lorcana, Pokemon TCG, Yu-Gi-Oh! What else did I see there? One Piece, the new One Piece card game. There's a little setup there where they're also promoting the Star Wars Unlimited card game as well. So if you want your card game fix, you got it covered. And again, tabletop games galore. They had so many different like vendors where you could buy them, and then they had a bunch of tables kind of like lined up where you could just play tabletop games. I saw so many people playing different games of all kinds, a lot that I've never even heard of. They made a board game based on Slay the Spire, for example. I thought that was pretty cool. I saw a few people playing that. So definitely a big presence of that kind of stuff. There's an area where you could just play Jackbox with friends, which was really cool. Like there's like they had like a big projector screen where they had Jackbox playing pretty much all day. You could just sit down in that area and just play Jackbox with strangers or your friends. It was pretty cool. Of course, you got your panels. So I didn't do a whole lot of panels this time. I was with our mutual friend Grayson. We hung out for part of the convention time, and one panel that we did was this was like a 17+ panel that they did like late on the first day, which was basically Video Game Tinder, where a bunch of pictures of video game characters would be shown, and the panelists had to either swipe left or swipe right. It was a bunch of different journalists from different places. I thought it was a pretty funny panel. I also went to a Metroidvania panel, which had oh goodness, it had a guy from the developer BitKid, James Montagna from Way Forward, Jeremy Parrish. I believe he's I forgot what he does. I apologize, but he's a big Metroidvania guy. And then they also had I believe his name was Saigo Aizawa from Bandai Namco to talk about Shadow Lab. So they were talking about Shadow Labyrinth. They were talking about the Shantae series and just Metroidvania the series in general, just like what that genre means. I'm a big fan of the Kit and Krista podcast, so I attended a live podcast of that, so I was able to see that. But yeah, they had all kind of stuff like that. There was also Games Done Quick was also there, so I sat down for a little bit to see some speedrun gameplay. Those guys really know what they're doing. It was pretty cool to see that live for the first time. And speaking of live events, throughout the entire weekend, they had this big area called the PAX Arena. Plenty of chairs around this like really big like screen that is viewable from different angles. And the main thing that they had was a Tekken 8 tournament that they were doing for the entire weekend. Qualifiers on Thursday, top whatever on Friday. Saturday they did a little bit of the tournament. We'll also do another event that I'm going to get to in a second. And then Sunday was basically the top 24 leading eventually into the grand finals. And I watched a good bit of that. It was great to see something like that live. You had TK Breezy and EE as commentators. So if you follow fighting games, you definitely know those names. But yeah, on Saturday, they also had a sponsored event at the PAX Arena. Capcom did a sponsored event where they're promoting Capcom Fighting Collection 2, which has games like the Power Stone games. It has Capcom versus SNK, Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max, stuff like that. And yeah, they had several of the crew from Up, Up, Down, Down, hosted by Austin Creed there. And they basically just did like a whole like wrestling themed like thing where even Kenny Omega stormed the tournament just to like battle out in a grudge match in both Power Stone as well as what was it, Capcom versus SNK. Yeah, that was very fun to see. Yeah, just stuff like that. Just like you have a lot of big names that are doing stuff like that, whether it's like panels or events like that, or just wandering around the convention too. There's just a lot of people that I recognize there. But yeah, no, PAX is definitely, if you are someone that just appreciates the art of games, video games, or just any kind of gaming whatsoever, I think there's something there for you. At some point, not necessarily this year, but at some point I'd like to check out PAX West as well, see what the vibes are there. But it was, and yeah, not to say nothing about Boston, by the way. This was my first time ever going to Boston. Nice city, at least from the little slice that I saw that's near the hotels and convention center. Can't comment on how the rest of the city is, but that little slice that I saw was very nice. The weather was very nice there. The weather was really bad one day, like it was cold and raining. But other than that, I think I had a really good time with the weather. But let's get into the games themselves. That's the main reason I'm sure a lot of you are listening to this. I tried out a few games there. Now, I did mention beforehand that there isn't as much of a big presence from the big video game studios to show off like the newest games that are going to be coming out soon. But there was still a little bit of a presence. The biggest one, there was a big tent where they had Elden Ring Night Rain. I unfortunately was not able to get that because signups for that went incredibly fast. But I did try out a few other games. So I'm going to be pulling out my notes here in case you get wondering why I have my phone out now. But the first thing I saw was I went to the Devolver Digital booth, and they had this nice game called Batsu there. It's a game that's being made by one person. I actually spoke to the developer. He was helping demo the game at the Devolver Digital booth. But Devolver is, of course, publishing the game, but this guy himself is developing it. But Batsu is basically a game that's you play as like a robot. It's a 3v3 game where each player is playing as like a different robot, and there's different objectives. The main objective that they were showing off in the demo kiosk was the sumo mode, where you're on a different stadium. Each time you play, you're on a different stadium. They can be like weird square stadiums, or they could be big round areas, or it could even be Fall Guy style, where there's like veins going like either way that you have to try to avoid. But the point is, your team is trying to be the last person standing in the sumo mode, opposed to the other team. Depending on how difficult the course is, you may be just fighting just to stay on yourself, never mind attacking your opponents. But that's the general gist of how Batsu is played. Let's see. Yeah, so for each game, yes, it's 3v3, like I said. First to 5 wins, so you'll have different rounds to get your opponent. There's also different things you can do to the robots. Like normally they're just 2 legs, 2 arms, how you expect the robot. But there's also modes where you can just move around on 1 leg, and that obviously makes controlling the game very difficult. Or you may only have 1 arm, which makes knocking out your opponents very different because you can't perform as many combos to push them off, or your push won't be as strong. So there's depending on what kind of wacky modes you try to mess out with, there's a lot of room for fun experimentation. It's definitely a party game first and foremost, that kind of wacky fun where you're just trying to take your opponent off the arena. But yeah, like I said, there's different characters you can play on. As far as I saw, the characters you're playing on doesn't matter too much. It's mostly like skins, cosmetics for your robot. The other thing that really changes their stats is, like, again, if you decide to give them like modifications like 1 arm or 1 leg or both or such like that. But otherwise, it's purely cosmetic for your robot. And again, after every set of 5 matches, every player will vote on stages, modes, and what have you to like move on forward. And I think I will say the build was a little early according to the vet dev that was there, but it still felt pretty fun to play. I think he could tighten up a little bit more, but I think by the time it actually releases, it'll be in a pretty good state. I would say the game is currently slated for Steam right now, but he is open to other platforms. But yeah, that's the first game I tried. Then I went over to, let's see here, went to the Marvelous Exceed booth. And I tried 2 games there. One of them is a game called Rune Factory Guardians of Ozma. Now, if you're familiar with the Rune Factory series, I mean, I don't have too much more to say about it because I'm very much a newcomer to this series. I've never really played a Rune Factory game. I had a good friend of mine who played them. May he rest in peace. But I never really played them myself. So Rune Factory, the best way to describe it if you're not familiar with it is think Harvest Moon / Story of Seasons. Sorry, let me try it again. Harvest Moon / Story of Seasons mixed with an action RPG. That's basically what Rune Factory is. So, you have aspects where you are doing the farming, just like in a Harvest Moon or Story of Seasons game. You're trying to plant your crops, you grow them, sell them, and there's male and female companions that you can befriend and maybe marry one day, just like in those mainline games. But then there's also aspects where you have to go into a cave and fight. And that could be either to gather more resources to use for your farmland or your village, or just to advance the story along, because there is quite a bit of story to this game as well. Usually with these kind of like farming games, the storyline is usually a little more on the casual side where you're just trying to grow your farm or ranch as much as possible. But there is definitely a bigger narrative going on here that you have to advance as you're going through the story. As far as the farming itself, I have some experience with Harvest Moon Story of Seasons. And when I say I have experience, I should clarify. In my Does It Hold Up series that I do on my personal Twitch channel, I have played the Super Nintendo Harvest Moon, and I've played Harvest Moon 64. And you can imagine going from the Super Nintendo to the Nintendo 64 games where things were very obtuse and a lot of the controls didn't explain themselves very well. Going to that to now modern consoles with Switch 2, and all the other platforms that it's releasing. Obviously, things have streamlined a lot since then. There's been a lot of quality of life improvements, as you could probably imagine. So, yeah, it's never been easier to know which plot of land you're trying to make, which kind of rocks you're trying to take down. And there's even, I like to call it a God mode, where if you don't want to just move the character around the farm and just do everything yourself, you can just literally just do a top-down view and just literally do it that way in grid-based strategy style. That's the way, if I was to play a game like this, that's the way I would want to do it, because I feel like that's way more efficient for getting stuff done as far as doing your farming within a timely manner. Now, moving on to the combat itself. You have a party with you that will also fight alongside you. You don't control the party members, but they're pretty intelligent. I would liken them to the Kingdom Hearts party members, where if you had them at a good settings, that they would do what you wanted them to do. Like, they were attacking the enemies pretty consistently and covering me pretty well, so I didn't have too much complaints about that. And you have a few different combat options. You can do a different slash. You could change weapons on the fly from like a direct slash tech, or you can do like a bow and arrow for distance attacks. You have like a special meter that can allow you to do even stronger moves. But of course, you have to, utilize it well, because it doesn't charge particularly fast. You gain meter by doing attacks on enemies, but only so much. So it's something you really want to use when you really need to do some serious damage. Or if you're fighting a boss, that's a good time to throw out those special moves as well. Yeah, no, it's I don't know if it's for me personally, but playing Rune Factory, I understand why it's loved, because it's taking the aspects of the farming simulator type of games like Harvest Moon, Story Seasons, and really injecting at least a little bit of agency and combat into it. It's a good genre for those who like a little bit of both, who don't want to do just one or the other. And I won't say that you can ignore one aspect of it. I think they really are closely entwined with each other. I think that is a hallmark of that series. Like, you can't just do the action and not do any farming, or vice versa. You have to kind of marry those two together. That's what that game is. But I think those who are sold on that idea, I think you're going to have a great time with this one, because I have a very good impression of it, and it looked really good too. Our build was on Steam, like we were playing like a PC build of the game, but the game is also going to be coming to modern platforms, including a Switch 2 version as well, for those looking forward to grabbing that. But yeah, I checked that out at the Marvel Succeed booth. The other game I checked was a game called The Big Cash. Now, this is a new game. This is like an indie developer, but they are being published by Marvelous as well. It is developed by a group called the Fillet Group, which is funny because it's the Big Catch Fish Fillet Group. Anyway, it's their first big project, and it's pretty cool that Marvelous is publishing it. But basically, it is a 3D platformer inspired by 32-bit platformers, so stuff that you see on the PlayStation 1 era. The graphics definitely match that in that sense. It's a little smoother than PS1 games. It's not quite as jaggedy as those polygonal as those games were, but you definitely get this sense of the sense of nostalgia if you did grow up with the PS1 era, I would say. But it takes place in a world where water has become kind of scarce. Fish have become kind of scarce. And so people who were once who once fishermen are now kind of like hunters. By the way, the main character is I think like a rabbit or a cat. He had very long ears, so it's definitely kind of like an anthropomorphic animal. But he is wandering about this world. He has a big fishing rod. And the fishing rod is basically how you interact with the world. That's the central mechanic of this game. You are using your fishing rod to do attacks. You're using it to grapple so you can rappel around the world, almost Spider-Man style. And you're also just doing some regular jumps and punches as well as you move about the world. There's a nice sense of exploration. Like most 3D platformers, there's a lot of the world to see. You can definitely find a lot of collectibles wandering about. Now, I will say, in the case of this demo, I didn't really get a sense of what those collectibles even do. Like, for example, in a Banjo-Kazooie type game, those collectibles, like collect 100 to get a life, or collect a certain amount of these to open a door, or collect a certain amount of these to make this character do something. I didn't really get a sense with the demo what I was even doing with these collectibles. It just seemed like they were there to be collected. I'm sure that in the final game, it'll be a little bit different, but just looking at it, I was like, what am I going to do with this? Again, just an early build of the demo. And as far as the movement felt pretty good. It could be a little smoother. Moving about with the fishing rod, for the most part, was pretty effective. If you had a target and you press the fishing rod button, it would connect to it, so you could keep on chain connecting targets without too much issue. But there's a fast momentum when you're coming out of your fishing rod, so you do need to prepare for that, because you may think you're going to land safely, and then suddenly you're running off the edge, and then you have to redo yourself. So that's a little... I don't think that was necessarily a fault of the game itself. I think it's just a part of the feature of this game itself, the momentum as you're moving. And it was definitely a little bit of a learning curve. And again, a part of the game that I think is just attributed to the fact that this is like a earlier build of the game, like a demo build, is that sometimes I would find like switches in the world that would like activate like a new path, and then I would go down said path, and then the path would lead nowhere. Now, will it lead somewhere the full game? Did I miss another switch that would lead it and make it lead somewhere even further? I don't know, but I got the general sense that there was still work to be done. The potential is there. The potential is certainly there for this developer's first big project. That's again an homage to 32-bit 3D platformers. I'm very impressed with it, but I'm curious to see how the final game will end up being. And if you're interested in this game for yourself, it is coming out this summer for PC, Mac, and Switch. So that's what I checked out at the Marvelous Exceed booth. I also, wandered about. I I don't have a lot to say about this next one. I tried out some retro platformer collections. I tried out Bubsy 3D. Bubsy 3D, Bubsy gets a bad rap, and you know what? He might deserve it, because I played Bubsy 3D as part of that collection, and it didn't look great, and it controlled even worse, man. Like, did people really play Bubsy and was like, oh man, I love this game? I'm like, what? Like, it didn't look good at all. It looked like a Saturn game, a Sega Saturn game, but worse. I don't know what platforms Bubsy 3D was originally on. I don't know if it was on PS1, but it looked really bad. And it controlled like garbage. And there's just like, the world didn't look good. It was just like a weird tile-based world that's just like, I'm talking about this game longer than I think it deserves. I was not impressed with Bubsy 3D. Yeah. But it's there, I guess, for those who are nostalgic for it. But what I did try as well was Gex Trilogy, or specifically, I think it was Gex 3D or Gex Enter the Gecko. Either way, it was one of the Gex games, and you're playing as Gex the Gecko. Now, that game has a cult fan base as well, another 32-bit platformer. And it definitely was trying to. It didn't feel like it was remastered. It definitely felt like it would look like the PS1 game that it was based upon. But unlike Bubsy, it actually controlled pretty dang well. Like, Gex felt nice to control. There's a nice sense of 3D platforming. There's collectibles, but I could kind of get a better sense of what they were leading me towards. And definitely a lot of humor. Well, Gex will make like a lot of snide comments. There's even a Looney Tunes based level where you have like an Elmer Fudd like just like wandering about that you have to just like sneak past or hit if you want to just get past him. So I just in the little bit that I played Gex, I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, I can understand why it didn't, emerge as like one of the premier 3D platformers, but it was pretty fun. I think those who enjoy platformers of that era that missed out on it, or certainly those that played it back in the day, will have a good time with this collection. I would definitely recommend that over Bubsy. But yeah, what else did I play? So I also went to the Atari booth, and this is pretty much the last few games that I had gotten my hands on that have not yet been released. So we had at the Atari booth. For those who don't know, by the way, Atari is still very much around. They do more publishing these days as opposed to developing games themselves. But nevertheless, it's like a mix of like, some indie games that just need a publisher's funding, like Atari. But they'll also like publish games like Atari 50, which they did a few years ago, or just other reimagined versions of classic games, and which one of them I'll be talking about in a second. But I wanted to talk about a new game I played, or at least seemed to be new. It's called Fatal Run 2089. Now, this game is very arcade-like. So you have a car, and you're kind of like in this very Mad Max-like wasteland that you're driving through. It's very much like the old 90s arcade racer games where you're trying to drive through a course as fast as possible, and you're trying to do it in a certain amount of time, because if you don't do it in that certain amount of time, time will be up and you won't be able to finish the race, and you will gain checkpoints similar to those style. But the twist is you're not just riding on a course. Your car has guns. Your car has rockets. And there are enemy cars on the track, and you can gain more time by destroying the enemies. You can like either use your guns to just shoot them down to gain more time. You can missile them to shoot more time, or you could just boost. You could just boost. Boost is not only good for making sure you finish on time, but Rocket League style, you can just kind of like destroy a car by smashing right into it, and like just like that if you like rear end it or something like that. And I really enjoyed that. And there are multiple paths available, so there's definitely replay value there. if you're trying to play this game multiple times. So, for example, there was a part where there's a fork in the road. I could go left or right. The right path was clear. The left path, however, was covered by rocks. So you need at least some guns to shoot your way past those rocks in order to go that path, which I assume would be a harder path. At the time, I didn't have any bullets because I had used them to take out enemies, but I can imagine that if you're a little more conservative with your weapons, you'll be able to do that and then be able to try out new paths. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Star Fox 64 in that way, in its arcade nature and the fact that there were alternate paths depending on how you interacted with the level. But yeah, each run of that game only lasts about 5 minutes, and the demo gave you access to one level. I should also mention there are a bunch of different cars to choose from, and a bunch of different characters. Again, the demo only lets you use one character and one car, but you can see in the character selection screen that I saw at least 4 cars there. I think at least 4 different characters that you can play as. So the full game, whenever this releases, will have a lot of options. I got to check back to get some more details on that. But yeah, Fatal Run 2089. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And the last game that I checked out was I mentioned before that Atari likes to do reimagine classic games. So they had a game back in the day called Breakout, which was very simple. You had like a little paddle at the bottom of the screen. There'd be a little ball, and you're basically just trying to hit like different blocks there. You're trying to break all the blocks with the little ball as you ping pong the ball back over there, kind of ricocheting a way to break it. So Breakout Beyond, which is the game that I played there, is based on that. But instead of being a vertical paddle where you're trying to hit the blocks up, it is now going to the left. It is now a horizontal scroller instead of a vertical scroller. I mean, it never scrolled, but now it's horizontal and it scrolls. So your paddle is constantly moving from left to right, and the ball has to be knocked to the blocks, not to break all the blocks, but to remove obstacles in your path, because ultimately you're trying to reach a finish line this time around, which is a little bit different than the past game where all you were trying to do was break all the blocks. It's fun, but it's also a little bit monotonous after a while. At least I personally felt so. But there's a clear goal you have to get to. And what's more is that there were a lot of levels. Like the demo offered the opportunity to check out so many different levels. And in the beginning, it's just different ways of you're trying to get to the finish line. But as you go forward, you start getting items too. You can start using items to like get you through these levels, and you'll need them to get through them because there'll be more traps that will block your way. You have like items that include like turrets, so that you can just like shoot a bunch of blocks out of your way in that way. You can make explosions to destroy a bunch of blocks that way. You can get extra balls to try to like do it that way, like a triple ball, for example, an extra paddle if you want. And also, I forgot to mention this as well, but when I was playing the game initially, I was having a hard time keeping the ball into play. Like the paddles, they moved a little fast. I kept missing the ball. What's nice, though, is they added a quality of life feature where the demo has told me that you could press the right trigger and you could slow the ball. Instead of the ball going like this, you could have it go like this, like a lot slower. Or you could also slow the paddle speed or raise the paddle speed as well on the fly. And I'm not talking about doing it like in a menu or anything like that. Like you could just do it right there just by holding trigger buttons, like change the paddle speed, change the ball speed. And that made it so much easier for me to like return shots and move on into the levels. I think it's going to depend on the person, but I think those features are going to really help you progress in this game if you're really into that breakout style. And best of all, there's even a local 2-player mode if you want. So the second player can play as a second paddle, and you guys can work together to get through the game as well, which I think is a great co-op experience. I have to imagine there's online play, but I wasn't able to get that information. But yeah, definitely if you have a friend sitting down next to you playing this game, I think that'll be a lot of fun. And it looks like that is pretty much every game that I had tried at PAX East. Honestly, for my first time going, I think that's pretty dang good. The longest line of those games that I had to wait for was definitely Rune Factory, Guardians of Azuma. That was a lot of people were interested to play that game, understandably so. That's probably one of the bigger games I had there next to Elden Ring. I think I was there for about maybe 40 minutes or so. So it was definitely a decent wait. But I enjoyed the experience of getting to these lines and trying out these games before they came out or they come out. I think it's a cool experience. But yeah, at the end of the day, PAX is all about checking out all these different gaming experiences that are available, regardless of your gaming taste. As long as you enjoy games, there's definitely something for you at PAX. And I think the future of games is looking pretty dang bright. But that is my impressions of PAX East. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. It was definitely a little bit of a different episode talking to you guys directly about it. But I had a lot of fun with PAX East. I will definitely go back again sometime. Again, definitely want to check out PAX West as well. I think that'll be a good experience to check out as well. But and I enjoyed the convention for what it was, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hopeful that in the future, maybe one of the bigger companies would come out, bring something that I really want to check out. Like, I'll wait a few hours for that. I got a Switch, I got a mobile device. I could wait a few hours in line. I don't mind. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in the future. But I'm very satisfied with the entire experience. I highly recommend going to this. If you're listening to this podcast or watching this podcast on YouTube. I think this is something that you would definitely want to check out at least once in your life, just because it is such a cool experience to see this just mecca of people that all share the love of games. Yeah, that's my definitely recommendation. But thank you guys for listening. Thank you all for watching HP Critical, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye, everyone.